While this is technically the first video in my series concerning or covering game system design, it is actually an afterthought and is not specifically part of my game design series. Instead, it's a simple review of all the Skirmish set of rules that I'm aware of, so players can see what options are available for them in this scale. I have not, except for only a few of the rules, studied them in any great detail, so generally my commentary per rules will be fairly superficial, but nonetheless may assist players in determining if certain rules are to their sort of liking or not. But in terms of Skirmish rules and game systems, the reason why it's not actually part of my game system design series is that Skirmish rules, or most of them, use a game system which is quite different from even squad scale sets of rules. The main focus is a very low number of elements, quick play, and use of ideas such as cards for movement sequence of plays and cards for even combat resolution is used in order to speed up play. It's in some ways closer to a game of chess than a game of, let's say, squad scale miniatures or higher scale. As a result, those game systems are really difficult to transplant into any other scale, but nonetheless, for anyone interested in the micro-armour figure gaming area, Skirmish scale rules definitely do have a place. The Skirmish rules are defined by the scale used for infantry. If each element or base represents a single soldier, it's Skirmish scale. Skirmish scale rules are very loose when it comes to game scales, such as distance scales and game turn scales. Often the sequence of play is similar to chess, with only one element being moved at a time by each side. This was certainly not how the scale started, but it's certainly the state of the art today. One very good thing about the scale is that games are easy to set up and quick to play, as long as strengths on each side is kept to a minimum. The downside is the main focus is on infantry rather than tanks and vehicles, but this is only a downside if you want to play with tanks. Those players may be better off moving to a squad scale set of a micro-armour figure gaming rules. Going back to 1972, which is an awful long time ago, these set of rules probably are the Adam of Skirmish rules. Printed in 1972 and focused primarily on infantry actions. Designed initially for 20mm figures, or 172, it also caters to 54mm figures. The main focus was accuracy, detail, historical, accuracy and things of that nature, because the people designing it were previous military folks that actually fought in the desert from memory. So as a result, the basic ethos of these rules does not really fit in very well with modern rules that much. The rules are available as a free PDF download, and I must admit the rules are hard to understand or interpret. I think the sequence of play is a fluid simultaneous movement system, but after studying the rules several times, I'm really uncertain if this is correct. They were popular in their days, although they were quickly supplanted by a sort of middle squad scale set of rules, which came out several years after this. Battleground World War II, which actually is a set of rules which made me create this video series in the first place, is a comprehensive, well-presented set of skirmish rules for World War II, resolving action at the individual soldier and vehicle and crew member level. The designer's intent is to provide a fast-playing set of rules which captures the spirit of ground combat. Units of both sides move in a random order determined by playing of cards, with each person able to perform 2 actions per turn. Morale rules allow for fanatics, cowards and heroes, and gut checks are required before characters can perform highly risky acts. Rules covering artillery, engineers, armoured and infantry combat, but do not cover air support, which is quite reasonable. Generic squad organisation is provided, and generic hit locations for tanks and half-tanks supplemented will fill in more detail, as well as data for nationalities other than German, American and Russian. 7 scenarios are designed to allow players to gradually learn the rules, including a chapter on making your own terrain, plus an introduction by Harold Coyne, author of Team Yankee. These tend to be fairly popular sets of rules, and certainly would be a set of rules I would recommend people should look at initially. As you can see by the date, 1997, these are, in terms of the modern era of the rules, the first in my series, or the oldest. The Face of Battle, which came out in 2001, is also a set of rules which uses a set of cards. The cards are used to determine if soldiers complete an action or not. There is no I go, you go playing here. Both you and your opponent flip cards from the respective deck and state what action is to be completed. The game can be a bit complex and can scare off green wargamers due to this complexity. However, for those willing to learn, and I've been told it's not that difficult set of rules to play or learn, you will be rewarded with a level of gaming that will astound you. My initial analysis of these rules are that they're probably a little bit more complex than most of these card-based games, but still highly playable. Arc of Fire, which came out in 2002, is once again another set of rules which uses a card-based initiative system. The cards are collected together and shuffled to make a pack, with each card being turned over in sequence to determine the order the units take their action in each turn. When a group's card is turned, it gets to act. The author also produced excellent World War II campaign scenario booklets, which are ideal for Arc of Fire. These booklets add a lot of detail on the various units and order of battle, which is lacking in the rules. I'm not aware of how popular or otherwise these sets of rules are, and they are a bit older than the more modern ones, but my initial gut feeling is they look like a good, fun set of rules. I Ain't Been Shot, Mum, which, to the best of my knowledge, the first version came out in 2005. There may have been early ones, but I think 2005 is the earliest, is a very unusual set of rules, or at least I thought so when I first looked at it, and that's before I understood the whole concept of cards being used to determine movement order. Once again, this is another card-based set of rules. Based on my analysis, these are extremely playable and fun, and are extremely enjoyable sets of rules. However, there is a sacrifice of realism. There's nothing wrong with this, and getting a good fun game is really the whole point of the exercise. But for more experienced players, it may not be an ideal choice. The ground and time scales are difficult to pin down, as most of the rules in this scale, with one designer indicating the ground scale was close to 1 in 300, which puts this very firmly in the skirmish arena. It's also firmly in the skirmish arena because you move individual soldiers around. Patrol World War II is a fast-playing man-to-man skirmish system that recreates squad patrols in any theatre of the Second World War with as little as 10 miniatures per side and a 4x4 foot playing area. Individual games last from 15 minutes to 1 hour, allowing for multiple exciting games in an evening's play. Look, Patrol takes you beyond the line 'em up and shoot 'em down miniature gaming path, so there is a little bit more complexity there, but it really is very much one that's focused on simplicity and speed of play. Reasonably professional, much more fast to play than the previous rules that I've covered. Probably an interesting choice if you want a very small, if you want a game with a very small number of elements per side. Baptism of Fire 3 came out in 2009. Presumably there was a Baptism of Fire 1 and 2. This set of rules evolved from an earlier TFP game system rules, or set of rules, which indicates to me that this is probably at least the 4th or 5th generation of a common set of rules, which is actually a very good sign. Now, the rules apparently use what they claim is a non-traditional card draw, so once again it's still a card-based system, but rather than just picking one card and doing something and the other guy does the other, apparently the player with initiative deciding from 2 to 5 cards what to do, creating a pace of play and simultaneous resolution of both sides' activation. So there seems to be a lot more emphasis or complexity around the whole card and initiative side, which is quite a good thing. There are a couple of other interesting features. The rules also use a sliding dice scale to reflect relative difficulty to resolve tasks or functions. So once again, once you actually do something, there is a little bit more complexity there. What this tells me is that these are probably a more complex set of rules than a simple card-based set of rules, so it's moving towards the historical area, but by all accounts still quite playable. Chain Reaction first came out, or at least version 3 came out in 2009. The cover you see here is the 2015 version. Presumably there was a version 1 and 2, I'm not quite sure when they came out. Chain Reaction apparently has a lot of similarities with Nuts, which is a set of rules that I'll be covering in a moment. This game system, as does Nuts, allows you to easily play a 2-hour game at convention. Now, this is interesting because many of the previous rules we've covered, not all of them, allow you to play games in 1 hour, or in some cases even 15 minutes. So what we're dealing with here is a significantly more complex system. It does not appear to use a card system, which is also quite interesting, but it still retains that same level of flow that a card-based system would normally provide. So in a typical game, side A moves, shoots, conducts melee, then side B moves, shoots and conducts melee. In the THW reaction system, which is what these rules use, side A activates and moves some of its figures, side B reacts to that movement, which in turn may cause side A to react to that reaction, and so on. This goes back and forth until it peters out. Usually one side dies, it's incapacitated or flees, and then side A activates another group of figures. It plays much faster than description would lead you to think, so I suspect once you understand it, you can flow through it quite easily. The one good thing about it is you're actually moving more figures than the single one. Many of the earlier card-based systems, basically you only move one figure at a time. In this case, there are more than one figure. However, to reduce complexity, each player really only controls one figure, the rest move according to dice rolls and rule conditions. So we're dealing with something that really is working on this skirmish scale fluid movement system, but avoiding the use of cards by all accounts. A Force on Force came out also in 2009. Once again, I don't know if there are any earlier versions, I suspect not. These are incredibly professional sets of rules, very nice rule books, and by all accounts play quite well, but are significantly more complex and detailed than many of the rules we've covered previously. This is a standalone game, companion to Ambush Alley, so presumably Ambush Alley may have been the precursor to these sets of rules. Now, these particular rules are designed for conflicts between force mixes which are similar. Ambush Alley, the earlier version, was primarily professional forces against irregulars. But nonetheless, this also does allow you to cover mixed engagements involving forces containing both regular and irregular troops. It's interesting. I strongly suspect these rules are significantly more focused on realism and accuracy than simple, quick play. So I think if you're interested in accuracy, these definitely are ones to consider, and the rules book look really nice. Well, we're coming to Nuts, which came out in 2010. Once again, I'm not sure if there's any earlier versions, but it's based off the Chain Reaction 3 system. So, by the looks of it, it's actually an offshoot of Chain Reaction, using the same THW system, which allows you to easily play a 2-hour game at a convention. The core of Nuts is its unique reaction system, making combat dynamic and unpredictable. Each soldier may react differently under fire, including the enemy units reacting differently under fire. There are hidden enemies called possible enemy forces. You'll never know where or when or how many of what type of enemy will pop up on the board to meet your squad. So by the looks of it, this is a more advanced version of the previous Chain Reaction 3 with more bells and whistles and presumably more excitement. Flying Lead also came out in 2010, and these sets of rules once again takes a previous game mechanic system, apparently based on a set of rules called Song of Blades and Heroes, and adds to this to enhance it and allow you to use high-powered projectile weapons. These core rules will enable you to play using a small table area and a handful of figures. By using our online force and weapon and vehicle generator, players will be able to customize their characters and get playing straight away. Look, these rules probably are more focused on the very low number of figures on each side and some sort of scenario building around it. Probably less on commanding, let's say, a platoon, etc., but nonetheless could be a fun set of rules. But beyond that, I have no idea how they play or how useful or how popular they are. Well, we come to Bolt Action, which came out in 2012, and these are another very nice set of rules and very popular and played by an awful lot of people. So there's got to be something about these rules that a lot of people find very attractive. The game mechanics are similar to 40k, which makes it very easy for 40k veterans to understand, and that could be one reason why it's so popular. There are a lot of 40k players. The system on a whole is more gameplay focused than the old 40k. I'm not quite sure what that means. I would suggest it's probably more focused on accuracy. All weapons are generic, being reduced to rifle and SMG, rather than each faction having its own correct and different weapon, leaving the game to have a fairly arcade feel to those who want a more historically focused and realistic game. So clearly there's still a pretty big focus on simplicity and ease of play, but nonetheless I see these a lot, so there's got to be something about them that many players find very attractive. Chain of Command came out in 2013. These are another two fat lardies sets of rules, and I do remember when they were discussing coming out with these rules, and they were quite excited. They're rules for World War II combat at a platoon level. Now, these rules use an interesting patrol phase deployment method, and I gather that's its main difference over the previous sets of rules that two fat lardies have come out with. Each player placing a number of patrol markers on the table, which move until they're within 12 inches of an enemy patrol marker. Obviously there's some restrictions in how they move. This represents when everything's moved and everything is fixed, this represents the deployment zone for each player. Instead of cards, these rules use an activation die roll system. The rules have a good range of support materials such as armor lists and scenarios. Very complete and professional. My gut feelings are that these sets of rules are very much I ain't been shot mum type set of rules, but moving it more towards realism, historical accuracy, while attempting to retain as much of the playability as possible. So my gut feeling is, if you're interested in Skirmish and you're interested in a little bit of detail, these are probably the rules that you would start gravitating towards. A Focused Firepower came out in 2015. Now these are freeware rules with all the pluses and minuses associated with freeware rules. The pluses are, of course, they're free. The minuses are that you may not have all the supporting material that you would expect, and the professionalism of it possibly isn't that good. However, I must admit, going through the website, these rules apparently have been under development and worked on for quite a long time, and I saw an awful lot of pictures of people playing with these sets of rules, so I suspect that these may be one of the better freeware sets of rules out there. Focused Firepower is a scenario-driven World War II tabletop wargame set of rules designed to be played with 1/72 scale miniatures, although the system works just as well with 28mm or 1/56 scale models. We've endeavoured to offer an in-depth game system with focus on realism, but the system we have developed is easy to learn and game flows well. Look, the way I interpret that is that the people that design these games are interested in the detail. Obviously, they're keeping the simplicity level as simple as possible, but the main focus is on historical accuracy and detail. And again, similar to Chain of Command, I suspect those players who possibly tire of the excessive simplicity of some of the 1 hour skirmish scale rules may wish to gravitate towards these sets of rules. Combat Patrol came out in 2016 to the best of my knowledge. I'm not quite sure if there was any earlier development, etc., but we come back to the card-based miniatures rules. You've probably noticed that we went through a burst of card-based rules that progressively got more and more complex, and then suddenly the cards disappeared and we went to a more complex system, either using dice or more complex rule systems. These rules come back to your good old-fashioned cards. The unique double random activation mechanism provides a leap-ahead method for activating units, which provides the friction and drama of card-based systems with none of its drawbacks. My interpretations are that it's a card-based set of rules with a lot of flash and detail in it, and nothing particularly unique. However, what seems to be quite unique here is that it uses a card-based combat resolution mechanism, which, according to the designers, is exciting and simple, while eliminating unsightly charts and cards cluttering your beautiful gaming table. Look, cluttering of your beautiful gaming table is always a big negative, but nonetheless, it's not a big or major issue. Nonetheless, having a card-based combat resolution mechanism is an interesting idea. And I must admit, looking at the cards, they look very nice indeed. In conclusion, it's obvious the primary objective of most skirmish rules is playability with fun, short and intense games. This is a good objective, and apart from some rules which do increase the focus on detail, the historical accuracy does suffer as a result. I personally do not mind this, as in my old age my main focus is getting a fun game, but I must admit I do like more historical detail than most of the rules provide. This concludes Part 1, Section A of my video on micro-armour game system design. Part 1, Section B will cover the next scale up, which is squad scale. The subsequent videos will dive much deeper into the game systems of the various rules. This was just simply a quick overview of various skirmish scale sets of micro-armour rules. Denken Sie daran, immer für Heil, Heimatland zu kämpfen.